All right, that's it, boys. We're content farming. Hey, what's up, guys? It's me, Old School TCG, and today I'm gonna do my first Edison tier list. Who would have thought that this is gonna be some content farming shit? Yeah, I've recently hit 100 subscribers, so I'm just going to make this video as sort of like a thank you and also just to put my thoughts finally into a video about how I feel about this format. I shuffled all these decks basically, and I'm just going to basically just go through my thoughts about where I think they deserve to be in this format. Of course, many of these decks could also move depending on if there's new discoveries made with these decks, or if something like a meta shift to where one deck just gets pounced down to the ground and where it doesn't really have to exist anymore. So we'll start it off first with Neospatians. Now, Neospatians is one of those decks that I find to be, it's really cool. It's cool in an aspect of like, you have so many card options in the deck that you get to use like a Grand Mole, which in all fairness is a pretty good card, especially into certain matchups. And you also get Dark Panther, Cross Porter being a really good search card. And I think it's a really good engine into certain decks. But I don't think that it deserves like a tier. I don't think it's a tier 1 deck, like, or a best deck in format. But I will put it into tier 1.5. I think it's pretty strong. I'm still trying to test with it. I can't really understand it all that well, but I do know that it can pop off really well depending on how you play the deck. Next, we're going to talk about is more or less, I think this is like pure plant variant, or plant synchro in this case. And to be honest, I think this is also a tier like 1.5 deck. If you guys won't figure this out, a lot of decks are going to be tier 1.5. This deck just to me seems pretty strong. I do like that Titanial in this deck is like just a blowout for so many decks. Mystic Tomato is still a really good searcher. Twilight Rose Knight being able to go for a 1-card Synchro 7 is really, really strong. So I do think that this deck actually is, like, in all accounts, actually pretty good. I don't have access to this deck, like personally I don't have the cards for it, but I have seen my friends play it and they say that it's pretty good. Next we're talking about Cat Synchro. This is the only really cat deck that I'm going to talk about. I still think that Cat Synchro, yeah, it's going to be tier 1.5 once again. Cat Synchro to me seems to be one of those decks that's like, you need to find your pieces, but at the exact same time you also can't find other certain pieces because you don't want to brick on them. I do think that Exeter Arabellum is a really, really strong card, especially into an open board state where you can just knock 2 cards out of your opponent's hand for free. So I think that this deck can actually do a lot more things in the future, and I do think that there needs to be maybe just a few more like tweaks to the deck, and I think it might earn its tier 1 spot. But in all honesty, I think that this deck is it's really good. It's just missing that one little piece to bring it above to the next tier. Speaking of the next tier, we have Monarch Frogs. This is the first of many frog variants. Konami fucking reprint Substitute already. This is going to be tier 1. I do think that the Monarch variant, this is strictly the Monarch variant with Junk Synchron, which I think this was supposed to be, but I think Caius just fits it better. The Frog Monarch deck is just so consistent. That is one thing that I like about this deck. This deck, if you're to go card for card against your opponent on just top decking wars, the second that you dump every single one of your frogs out of your deck is supposed to just beat your opponent every single turn. That's exactly what these Monarchs are supposed to do. You play the Caiuses to just wipe your opponent's shit, deal burn damage if needed, and then hit for 24. It's incredible. Same with the Ryzas and everything like that to put them on the top of the deck. It's a very, very strong deck. It definitely deserves a tier 1 spot, but it's not one of the 3 best decks in format. Spoiler, there's 3 of them. Also in tier 1, I will be putting the Diva Zombie deck. I do think that Diva Zombie is really strong. This was actually probably one of the first decks that I played when I entered Edison format. I do not play it anymore, but that doesn't mean I still have that doesn't mean I don't have respect for the deck anymore. I think that Diva Zombie is still incredibly strong, but I think it gets outclassed by a lot of decks, especially some of the newer decks that come out through the zombies. There's also like 5 different zombie variants, maybe even 6 on this list somewhere. And to be completely honest, I do think that Diva Zombie is better than most of them, but it is weaker than one. The one that I will talk about later is, I think, the best variant of it, and it just destroys it in every single aspect of the deck. Up next is going to be Ultimate Offering Zombies, and this is a tier 1.5 for me. Now, I do love Ultimate Offering. If you guys don't know, I had a top, well, sort of. I lost to Fraser Smith in the finals of the Giant Card event at the first Arbet IRL, and I was playing Geminis, and I had super Ultimate Offerings at the time. I do think that Ultimate Offering Zombies is a pretty strong deck, because Diva Zombies, the one thing that I recognized is that they lack is just consistency, being able to get a monster on the board without having to use a normal summon. And that was the big problem for a lot of the deck, was not being able to just have a monster on board already, so you can use either Deep Sea Diva, Plague Shredder, Zombie Master, a ton of cards like that. And being able to use Ultimate Offering gives you those extra accesses to those normal summons that you wouldn't have initially. I think this deck can explode at a moment's notice and just wipe your opponent out. So it's not a tier 2 deck or a Burning Money deck, but it is a tier 1.5, and that's where I'm going to leave it. Now, onto the first best deck in the format. We have, of course, Hero Frog. What can I say that hasn't already been said about this deck? This deck is ridiculously strong. The Hero Engine, Miracle Fusion, Neos Alias, Stratos. It is just absolutely ridiculous how good the Hero Engine just meshes with the Frog Engine. The Frogs, once again, one of the best engines in the format. It takes some decks to a next level just because it plays the Frogs. And then being able to make a blowout card in Absolute Zero at the drop of a hat is insane to me. And that's why it honestly has earned its spot as one of the 3 best decks in the format, and it's going to be there to stay for a while. Now, granted, it can get countered. Most decks can get countered, but Hero Frog, if you are planning on going to a tournament and you have this deck, you're going to do very, very well with it. Konami reprint Substitute already. Next, we have Hero Beat. This is going to be another tier 1 deck for me. Hero Beat is extremely strong. I really do like it. It has more of the stun aspect of most other decks, and is able to just do a lot of things while being able to keep your opponent down. It's got one of the best 1-for-1 cards in the format, being Gemini Spark, which is technically a +1 because you get to draw right afterwards. And using Hero Blast is absolutely incredible. But to me, I think that Hero Beat is just a little bit lower than most of these other decks that I'm going to be talking about, especially the 3 best decks in the format, the tier and the other tier ones. It's on the limbo side for me between tier 1 and tier 1.5. So this is the only time that I will say it was probably going to be at the bottom of tier 1, but it's definitely not to be it's definitely not a deck to be a pushover. This deck is extremely lethal and extremely bad to deal with if they steamroll you. Also, having access to Absolute Zero is still one of the best things that deck can ever do. Alright, going up next, we have one of my first hot takes, and that is going to be Test Ape Gladiator Beast. Now, Test Ape Gladiator Beast, I believe, is actually really strong, but not that strong. It is going to be a tier 1.5 to me, and granted, if you don't like tier 1.5, just make it tier 2, make the other deck tier 3, make the last one tier 4, or Burning Money, whatever. I think that Test Gladiator Beast is the best variant of Gladiator Beast, which isn't saying much, but it's still good. I think the access to Test Ape in this deck, being able to set it on your opponent and not having them not realize what it is in game 1, is a very, very big just blindside onto your opponent if they can't handle the Gladiator Beast deck. Remember, it's always said like this: if you are playing the Gladiator Beast deck, it feels like the worst deck in the format, but if your opponent plays it, it looks absolutely cracked. That is basically how I feel about the Test Ape, because of them being able to creature swap it. Creature swap is a really strong card into into a lot of the decks. That's why I really like Turbo Frog. Coming up next, we have X-Sabers. Now, I know Totogon absolutely loves this deck, but I'm sorry. It is burning money. If you are playing X-Sabers at this time, you are burning money. Now, if you waited an extra month and you were able to play in the Shining Darkness, I'd put that into best deck in one of the best decks in the format. But unfortunately, X-Sabers is just not that strong. They are very, very weak. They just require too much to set up, in my opinion. Now, granted, they could move up if something were to happen where we discover a new tech for this deck and makes it absolutely incredible. But to be honest, if you're planning on building a deck for Edison format, if you're going to build X-Sabers, I'm just going to say it, you're pretty much burning money. Alright, now we're moving on to another best deck in the format. That being Vayu. Vayu, of course, one of the best decks in the format, just so much, it's just so easily able to pivot on anything. You need to slow the game down, you can do it. You need to speed up, you can do it. The deck doesn't stop. It just keeps going. Now there's, two other variants of Vayu on this list somewhere, which I will talk about them both in turn. But Vayu, the pure variant with just Raikos, Hamsters, Dark Graph or Armageddonite, just the pure variant is really, really good. It is one of the top 3 best decks in the format, and it's honestly, it's just going to stay there. It is so good. Now, we're going to talk about our first tier 2 deck, Gadgets. Now, Solidarity Gadgets, they're okay. I'm going to straight up say they're okay. First of all, I'm not talking about Doom Caliber Gadgets because what the fuck is that deck even going to do? It's going to do nothing. It breaks on itself. Now, Pure Gadgets is pretty alright. It being able to go normal summon search 1 every single turn is not that bad. But unfortunately, there are just too many decks that just do too much in front of its face. You could play Hero Frogs and just watch them suffer because you can blow them out of the water in literally a moment. You can play Vayu and just control the board state until they lose. Same with the Monarch Frogs, same with a lot of these decks. A lot of these decks are just so much better than Gadgets, and Gadgets, quite frankly, just kind of suck. Now, recently, this used to be down here in Burning Money, but it's not. It's not even up here anymore. To be completely honest, I do think that Dark Gaia, the Rock variant deck, is up here in tier 1.5. There are 2 variants I've seen, the Light Sword and the Rock variant. I'm not going to put both, I'm just going to lump them both together on this one. But if you're going to ask my honest opinion, I'd probably say that the Rock variant is better. I think that the Dark Gaia deck is a really good surprise deck into a lot of people who don't know what they're doing against it. If you're going to play with this deck, you're able to blow them out with a ton of damage. So if your opponent is playing a deck that does a ton of, they're taking a ton of damage, like using instant fusions, like using ultimate offering effects, like using Solemn, everything like that, if you get into a position where you're able to just one card shoot them down, that deck does it the most. And I feel like it's incredibly strong, but it's almost there. It could be tier 1, but it's not there just yet. So now let's go ahead and move on to Macrocosmos, and we all know where this is going. If you're playing a Banishing deck, you might get a tournament. A game, that's maybe. And it's only if you're going up against decks that require their graveyard, but even then they can still destroy it because they're going to play shit like Raikou, MST, Heavy Storm, Giant Tornado, Twister, Dust Tornado. I don't give a shit anymore. Macrocosmos, the deck, just basically, it just sucks. It is so bad. So don't play this. Don't spend your money on Guardian Eatos. Just build a different deck. It is just not good. Now we move on to Disaster. Sorry, this is Hopeless. Sorry. Hopeless Dragons are actually still kind of shit. Tier 2. I do think that the Dragon Engine is really, really strong, but not mixed with the Norlaris stuff. It's not all there. There is a better Norlaris deck than this one, we all know it, but it's just not there. So moving on, we're gonna talk about Flamvell zombies. Yeah, you're burning money with this deck. Zombies, really good. Flamvilles, they're okay by themselves. Just separate them. Don't play them together. They kind of suck. Granted, it is the only level 4 tuner in the game that's really good, besides like Debris Dragon. Don't do it. It's not good. Just play pure Flamvilles at that point. It's a somewhat okay deck. I still don't think the deck's good. But it's just way better than playing the combination of the two. It's so conflicting. Now we're going to move on to the Blackwing hybrid deck. And this is another hot take. It's not that good. It's not a tier 1 deck anymore. I don't think that Blackwing hybrid is personally all that good. It's just play the two of them separately. If you're playing pure Blackwings, you already have access into the value stuff later on with Shura or with just finding it through Black Whirlwind when you have to normal summon a Blizzard. It's still fine. You can still play the value stuff, just only play it at one of in the deck. You don't need the access to Dark Greffers in this deck. Just separate them and play one of the two decks. You don't need to play both at the exact same time. It's not that strong. Now, moving on to fairies. Keegan, I love you, but this shit is cope tier. I am sorry. Fairy Pure, it is cope tier to the max. Every single time when I see a fairy player, they're always struggling. Their brain power is going through the fucking roof just to lose to a normal summon of Shura. It is so fucking bad. I am sorry. Fairies sound insane on paper. They really do. They look incredible. But you have to use so much brain power and play absolutely perfect just to get sacked to dad. It is so unfortunate. This deck should be much better. Granted, there are two other fairy variants that I think are better than it, but it just is not there. Pure Fairies is not there. Play the other fairy variants and you will be fine. Moving on, we're talking about Instant Zombie. This is the best variant of zombies, bar none. I think that this deck is absolutely incredible. It uses the emergency teleport way better than Well does, which I will talk about. I think that the Goblin Zombie with Instant Fusion, with Play Spreader, is just so lethal. Emergency Teleport, incredibly strong, and it feels amazing in the deck. You can use Reaper of the Nightmares, also, another card to reprint. Come on, Konami. Both of those cards just wipe out your opponent. You can make your deck immediately be able to go for a Black Rose Dragon, wipe your opponent's entire board, then use Book of Life to return the Reaper of the Nightmare to rip a card out of your opponent's hand. It is so fucking strong. I think that Instant Fusion zombies are incredibly good. If I didn't sell my shit for normal zombies, I'd probably be building this, but unfortunately, I already did, and I don't plan on rebuilding it because it's going to cost me a lot of money. Now we're going to talk about Diva Frog. Now, I think that Diva Frog is probably actually the least good of the frog variants, except for, like, of course, the frog combo, but I'm not going to talk about that deck because I don't want to go into it. The Diva Frog, like, it's got some good things going for it. It's got a pretty good Synchro Pill altogether. It's alright. It's pretty good. But it's just not as strong as every single other variant of the frogs. It makes Diva a really good monster. It can make 6s pretty easily now because you have access to Treeborn Frog. It's a good deck. It's not the best. I just think that it is just a little bit weaker than most if not all the other variants of Frog. Now we're going to talk about Lightsworn. I was correct the first time. It's another tier 1.5 deck to me. The deck just so heavily relies on you milling super well and you being able to correctly identify how you're supposed to navigate through boards and then being able to drop JD when you need to. Granted, one of my close friends did lose to this in the finals because he got JD'd on with less than 6 cards in deck, and that was really, really unfortunate for him. But granted, I still think that this deck it's pretty alright. To be completely honest, I love Lightsworns. I love their aesthetic. It's an amazing looking deck, especially in max rarity. It relies too heavily on luck for my taste. I know a lot of people like it because it does rely on luck, and I know that if someone were to say, would you rather be all luck or all skill, give me luck any day of the week, I still don't think that Lightsworns are all necessarily all that good, even if you get really lucky. Next we're going to talk about is Ancient Gears. Unless your name is Ronak, yeah, you're burning your money. Ancient Gears really suck. I am sorry, but if you're going to, granted, if you're playing the Geartown variant of Frogs that Ronak is playing, and you're playing it at his level, you're probably one of the best decks in format, because nobody knows what the fuck you're doing, and you're just going to keep beating them. But if you're just going to try to play Ancient Gears with, like, Ancient Gear Golem, Ancient Gear Engineers, and that random shit, yeah, you're just burning a hole in your pocket by buying this deck. I would personally... I own Galvatron Dragons, but that's literally as far as I went, besides Geartowns. Next, we're going to talk about the Quick Draw Volcanic deck. Once again, it's another burning money deck. It's... No, just don't. The deck... Sure, it's got a really nice control aspect, but the second that your opponent knows what the fuck they're doing against this deck, it is so over for you. I just don't recommend anyone playing this deck. It is so bad. And that's pretty much all I gotta say about this deck. Next, we're gonna talk about Christia Sworn, which I think is tier 1. Alright, I do have to explain myself on this one, because I said that Light Sworns were all about luck, but what is this? I think that if Light Sworns are placed on pure luck, are still an okay deck. But I think that if you're relying on pure luck with Christia Sworn, you can do a lot more. And the only reason why is because of Archer Christia itself. Archer Christia is just such a strong boss monster, and then combine that with with another strong boss monster with JD. Yeah, this deck's kind of impossible to beat if your opponent lucks out so bad. Granted, your opponent still has to luck out, but it's so hard for your opponent to come back if you drop JD, blow up the board, and then drop Christia right next to it. It's like, cool, you have to answer 2 very, very hard problems, and you're not special summoning. It's very hard to beat this deck. But granted, still relies heavily on the luck aspect. I probably should put it in tier 1.5, but I'm going to leave it where it is, because I really do think that it's a lot stronger than people give it credit for. Now we're talking about the last best deck in the format, Blackwings. Yeah, not much to really be said about this deck. Deck's super consistent, just keeps on getting pluses. Black Whirlwind's a fucking card. Deck just knows what it's doing. It's incredible that this deck just knows every single thing that it's doing at all times. Yeah, you open up Black Whirlwind, cool, you're gonna do pretty well. You open up 2 Black Whirlwinds, you better be winning this game. Especially if you open up with Shura. The deck just does everything. You need to go tears through something with a big booty? Cool, you got Kalutz. You need to go ahead and revive a monster? You got Blizzard. You need to destroy 2 cards that are really hard out? You got Icarus Attack. The deck doesn't stop. The deck is, granted, I hate playing it because I think it's just way too easy to win with it. But I know why a lot of people play it, because it's so fucking good. You cannot stop that deck if your opponent... If you're playing Blackwings and you open up perfectly, your opponent will not be able to stop you. It is that ridiculously good. I like how we're going from ridiculously good to horrendously bad. Gladiator Beast, you're burning your money if you're playing this deck. I don't give a shit when anyone says at this point. I already talked about how good Gladiator Beast can be with test tape, but by themselves, they fucking suck. This deck sucks so bad. And I've lost to it many times. But I'm still going to put it in trash tier, because the second that your opponent knows exactly what they're doing and how to beat Gladiator Beast, you're dead. You're going to die. You are going to lose this game. Gladiator Beast is one of those decks that is just incredibly bad. You will never, ever play a good match against Gladiator Beast. if you played a good match against Gladiator Beast, you are gaslighting yourself into thinking that was a good match. Now, we're going to talk about the best variant of fairies, in my opinion, Chaos. I do think that Chaos Fairies is really, really strong. It is incredibly strong. I love how the aspect of Endrise makes the deck just feel so much better than everything else. I don't have much to really say about this deck, except it's just really strong. If you're going to play a fairy deck, you choose one of those two. You either play Chrysia Sworn, or you play the Endrise, the Chaos variant. Both of them are incredibly strong. One's incredibly sacky, the other one's incredibly consistent. You choose your fighter. Do you choose luck or skill? The choice is literally just up to you. Now we're going to talk about another strong deck, which is Diva Hero Beat. Diva Hero Beat, not much to really say. It takes the Hero Beat aspects and puts it up a little bit better, in my opinion, with the Diva stuff. Being able to have good access to a ton of synchros, have a little 5 axis with the Alliedress Cataster or Magical Android if you need the life points. Still having the Gemini Spark access, having more 6 axis. It's all in all, you cannot complain about this deck. This deck is just very, very good. It's incredibly consistent. I like how it plays. There's not really much else to say about that. And then we have Pure Diva Hero, which is a little bit different than Diva Hero Beat. I do think that Diva Hero is probably in the same vein with Diva Hero Beat. This one just doesn't play like a lot of the Gemini Sparks with the Hero Blast and stuff like that. It just plays a lot more combo-y. So I'll just separate a little bit more. And I think that the Absolute Zero version that's the one I'm looking at. The one with Malicious is still really strong. You're able to go for a lot of plays into level 8s that are really easy to get into with the divas and any of the heroes. I think that this deck just absolutely is pretty damn bonkers, if all things considered. It just requires a lot more just managing of resources than a lot of the other decks. And it's, all in all, fantastic deck, deserves its tier 1. Carpath, I'm sorry, KFC goes in tier 2. It's not doing so hot right now. We need Carpath to come back and give us something for this deck, because it's unfortunately not all that good. It's really, really all it comes down to is just that you're going to need a lot of setup. And even then, with all that setup, you're still relying on drawing. So you're relying on luck, and even then, that just doesn't function all that much. Another one that I'm going to talk about is Turbo Cannon. This is supposed to be with the frogs. I just didn't put the frog image in it, but everyone knows what this card basically does. The deck is really stunny, and it's really funny when it goes off and wins. If you're able to dump Lava Golem onto your opponent's side of the board and then attack, you take 30,000, they take 15, then you go for Turbo Cannon, burn up for another 15, that would usually be about 4,000 damage. That's already half their life points gone really, really fast, and you have access to things like Threatening Roar, Battle Fader, Gore's Tragodia. You have so many battle traps in this deck for a reason. It's ridiculously strong, and I kind of love it. Unfortunately, I don't have the stuff anymore, but I was playing a variant that was kind of a combination of the Frog Monarchs with the Turbo stuff. It was coined, I believe, Frog Cannon Light. Thanks Forcent for coining that. It was really, really fun playing it. We got second place at the 3v3. You can watch that video from Forcent's channel. I will probably put his thing at the bottom. Hopefully I remember to do that. If not, I will figure it out later. It's a fun deck, all things considered. It has the burn aspect and also has access to a good amount of synchros, which is actually quite cool for a frog variant deck. There's not much else really to say with that deck. Next, we're moving on to Gravekeepers. Yeah, you're burning money with this deck. You better hope to God you open up Royal Tribute, Necro Valley, Descendant, Spy, fucking whatever, and then just rip your opponent's hand to shreds. But if they're playing something that can also top deck on you, kind of sucks, buddy. Kind of sucks. It's, all in all, not that strong of a deck, to be completely honest. Just spend your money somewhere else. Chainburn. I'm going to say it once again. deck sucks. Don't play it. Just build something else. It's not all that strong. Let's move on to some actually good decks. Disaster Dragon. I'm gonna put in tier 1.5. Disaster Dragon is a pretty good deck. I like that the traps are able to really help with the deck a lot more. I really love Mask Dragon as a card. It's actually one of my favorite turbo packs, or I believe it's Turbo Pack Super. And it's just so funny that this deck is just able to consistently go through more motions than a lot of the other decks, and then be able to go with Red MD to be able to pop up more cards onto the board and swing for game. It's incredibly strong, but it's not the strongest of the Dragon variants by any measure, but it's definitely not the weakest. The strongest Dragon variant, which people think I'm going to put in best deck in format, it's not. It's not that good. I don't think it's best deck. I think it's good by all accounts. I just don't think that it's the strongest. But Dragon Turbo definitely deserves its spot in tier 1. Also, I forgot to say this early on, but you can put these decks in any order in their tier, and it's probably going to be the exact same how I would think anyway. Except for like when I specifically talk about them. And for this one, I will be talking about it because I do think that it is the best of the tier 1. This deck is incredibly strong and does so much damage because it's able to just draw through the entire deck, find a perfect hand, and then win next turn. It is incredibly good. It is incredibly just insane that this deck draws so much, and yet I don't see it around here very often. I don't see it at a lot of tournaments that I go to, so I don't know what's happening. I don't know if people are just scared of playing the deck or if it's just breaking a little too hard. Hopefully not. I would love to see it in the future, but it's just, honestly, I need to see more people playing this. It looks incredibly fun. Now let's move on to Machina. This is the pure Machina variant, mostly. It's pretty good. I do like that Fortress is just able to swing so wide and so hard, and then it has two amazing effects where if it gets destroyed by battle, it takes something with it, and then if it gets targeted by a monster effect, it takes a card out of your opponent's hand with it. It's incredibly good. I love that because if he goes against a Monarch, cool, you can banish this card, but I'm ripping a card out of your hand, and I'm going to rip the best piece out of your hand. Granted, that can get abused depending on what you do with it. If, like, I was playing against one of my friends' via Turbo list, and I got punished for doing that. So, granted, that is exactly how this deck works. Machina Fortress is just a hell of a card. Now I'm going to talk about possibly the second worst variant, actually third worst variant of zombies, and that's going to be which I'm actually going to have to put in tier 2 because it's not that good. I like the idea. I really do. I think that Krebons with Goblins is pretty strong, but it relies so heavily on getting everything set up and then drawing those cards later on. It just takes a little too much to get going. Granted, there's a better Psychic variant of the zombie deck, which we already talked about in tier 1 being Instant Zombie. I think that the deck just struggles a little too much for my liking. Granted, it can still take games. It's just not strong enough. Now, let's move on to Fish OTK, which is a 1.5 deck. This deck can surprise a lot of people. If you were to take this to a tournament and you high roll everything, yeah, you're going to win the tournament pretty handily. I remember about a year ago, maybe a little bit less than that, there was a guy that I met at Collectible Exchange for one of their for the PS5 events who was playing Fish OTK, and he went on a rampage with this deck. He was not getting stopped super easily. I think that what happened is that he probably took the event by storm, maybe got second or first. I don't really remember which place he got. I know he made top 8. I just don't remember where he placed. But unfortunately, I just think that people have figured out the deck a little bit too easily, and also they understand that we're in a very, very heavily attacked format, and a lot of decks, specifically the Frog variants, are playing Battle Faders, and that deck just kind of just folds to a lot of problems, especially getting deprisoned if they didn't cold wave you, and they also have to find other pieces while at the exact same time leaving a lot of pieces in deck. It needs a perfect storm to happen to be able to win its matches, but if it does, it's killing you, and it's really good. Alright, moving on to the next deck, Amaryllis Burn. This is a tier 1 deck. I think that the Amaryllis Burn is incredibly strong. I faced against my friend at Collectible Exchange recently for the 3v3 who was playing the Amaryllis stuff, and it's really strong. I really like how the Amaryllis stuff works, being able to deal damage to your opponent for free, so it punishes them for using cards that deal more damage to them, and is just able to kill your opponent so easily if they cannot respond to them. Granted, if your opponent knows what they are doing, and are able to get rid of your Amaryllises before they can become a problem, then you're going to kind of lose pretty hard, but you still have access to the rest of the plant deck, being Lone Fires to Titanials to Dandelions. It's strong, but it's just not strong enough. But I do love that Amaryllis is such a good deck. I think it deserves its tier 1 spot. Now we're going to talk about one of my favorite decks that I don't play anymore because I feel like the deck has forsaken me, and that is Gemini's. Tier 1.5, pretty easy, middle of the road. This deck can fuck. This deck can fuck hard. But, unfortunately, it is also susceptible to really, really bad bricks. And also, if your opponent just manages to draw better than you, like how you can see in one of my other videos where I was playing this deck, it just loses so badly to so many cards. I do think that if someone were to take Gemini's and were to be able to get lucky enough with their draws the entire tournament, I think they can easily win the match and win the tournament in its entirety. But unfortunately, I do think that the deck is still very bricky. I think that my variant of the deck is probably one of the best ones. It was a little bit tweaked through BK Kids Club. I still do think that Jude Fighter is actually a lot stronger than people give it credit for, especially it being another tuner. But granted, I still think the deck is strong. You just have to get lucky with it, and you have to find your ultimate offerings when you need them. So that's all I'm gonna really say about the deck. It's still pretty good. I wouldn't play it unless you're a die-hard fan of Gemini Soldier. Moving on, we've got Quick Draw Plant. Yeah, it's tier 2. It's alright. I hate Drill Warrior, sorry. With a Living Passion. It's not good. I don't like it. I don't like getting hit for 12 every single turn and then plussing a card into their hand. But unfortunately, I think it's just a lot of decks unfortunately beat it outright now. The people are able to outclass it really easily. Sure, Titanial is a really strong card, but against a lot of these other decks, this deck just still beats it. This deck just still loses. It's gonna fold to a lot of problem decks. It's gonna fold very easily to any form of interaction. It is just not good enough to beat most of the meta. So that's why I'm giving it its tier 2 spot. Next we have Norlaris Turbo. Now, Norlaris Turbo, I think, is earning of tier 1.5. It is still pretty strong. Granted, someone needs to discover something about it. I think it could be a tier 1 deck, but there needs to be a new form of something, just anything, to make the deck a little bit better. This deck can high roll like a motherfucker, but it can low roll and lose to itself so easily. I think that if we were to find something for this deck, it might go to tier 1, but I don't know what to look for it. Granted, this deck is funny because if your opponent is playing a deck that requires its hand and you just go, lol, no, Norlaris, throw all of it away, and then be able to go for the value stuff, that's incredibly good. It makes your opponent rely on their top decks, and if they're a setup deck, they normally won't be able to have that good of stuff. So I'm going to leave it in tier 1.5. it has possibility to move both ways. Either move down to tier 2 or move up to tier 1. It just depends on what happens with this deck going on into the future. Now, moving on to Plant Zombies. Yeah, I'm torn between tier 2 and tier 1.5. Because I know a friend who basically made this deck incredibly good. But at the exact same time, I don't think it's all that strong. I'm going to put it in tier 2. And the only reason why is because I think that you having the plant engine and the zombie engine just don't mesh well. Just play zombies separately or play plants separately. They're both better, quite literally, when they're not together. It feels like a conflict of interest, and they're just not going to do all that well. Moving on to Flamvels. Yeah, I'm sorry, Flamvels. You guys kind of suck as well. It's another tier 2 deck because I don't think... It's a tier 2 deck because I think it's... No, it's not. It is not a tier 2 deck. This deck sucks. Put in Burning Money. Don't build it. It is just not that good. This deck is incredibly just underperforming. It hasn't performed in a very long time. I think everyone knows what they're doing against it, especially now because everyone's going to be playing Dimensional Prisons. Everyone's playing hand traps, or battle faders mainly. Everyone's playing shit that gets around the fire dogs and whatever. Just don't play it. It's not good enough. Just play a different deck. Now, last and certainly not least, we're going to talk about the Jinzo OTK deck. Now, personally, I am playing this deck. I am trying it out, and it is very fun. I think that this deck is also pretty fucking strong, so it is tier 1. I think that this deck is potentially going to break a lot of people. The way that this deck is able to just burst, kill your opponent in game 1 easily, and then pivot games 2 and 3 to do what you need to do to kill your opponent depending on the matchups is incredible. Granted, you can brick pretty hard on this deck, but it shouldn't be able to. I think that this deck is going to be a tier 1 contender, and that's why I'm going to leave it in tier 1, because I think that this deck can prove itself. I think it's better than Dark Gaia, which these two are coming around at the same time. I think the Jinzo OTK is actually going to do a lot better because of Vayu. It's weird, but it is because of Vayu. Because they're running a lot of traps, and this one says lull to traps. I think that this deck is going to be a lot stronger than people give it credit for. So, that's it. That's all we got. We got every single deck that I could really think of in the format, also with a little help of some friends. I am not talking about these two for reasons I've discussed earlier, except for this one. This one, I just don't want to talk about it. But yeah, so